Today we're going to learn about indirect commands. The last real major thing we're going to want to learn how to indirectly report in Latin. So this is a big moment for us. But to begin with, let's go back and think about the other things we know how to report indirectly. So indirect discourse more generally. You want to take a second and try and think of two other types of phrases other than commands, which we know how to report. Pause the video if you need more time, because I'm jumping on. Indirect statement and indirect question. Hopefully you got them both. And do you think you can come up with an example of each of these in English, or even better yet, in Latin, if you keep things simple? And remember how they kind of function? Why don't you pause the video and take a second again to retrieve this? A reminder, this sort of retrieval is key. Freshen up these synapses, which are going to help you, that same sort of part of your brain, you're going to want to store this information about indirect command. Okay? So pause the video if you want more time. All right, so I've provided you with some examples. First off, I've given you a direct statement. So a reminder that indirect statement is just reporting a statement in English. So the sky is blue is a statement. An indirect statement would be to say, Jimmy says that the sky is blue. Okay, so it's being reported. Jimmy hears that the sky is blue. Any sort of verb that can do reporting can introduce indirect statement. And a reminder, how does that change things? Well, Theseus est fortis, right? If I want to report it, I could say, Scio, I know, Thesium esse fortem. So my subject's going to become accusative. That verb, that main verb in the direct statement, right? When we report it, is actually going to become an infinitive. And then if we do have a predicate, if we have something renaming Theseus, now before it was nominative because Theseus is nominative, now it's going to be accusative because Thesium is accusative. Indirect question, as you might remember, if indirect statement is reporting a statement, indirect question would be reporting a question. Yes. So a direct question might be Quomodo Medea Iasonem Iuvavit. How did Medea help Jason? How did Medea help Jason? The indirect question could be Discunt Quomodo Medea Iasonem Iuvaverit. So what we do, we just report it. Again, we need a reporting verb. They learn, right? They know, they say. Discunt, they learn here. Quomodo, how. So we need some sort of interrogative pronoun or adverb to introduce the question, but it's often going to be the same interrogative pronoun or adverb that was part of the direct question. And then the big thing that's going to change is that the nice thing is you can keep the nominative case the same, accusative case the same, unlike in indirect statement where you have to make that nominative into an accusative subject. The one thing that's going to change is the mood of the verb. It's not going to be indicative anymore, it's going to be subjunctive. And specifically here, it's going to be perfect tense subjunctive because we are in primary sequence, because that main verb is present tense. Okay? That's a lot to handle right now. Pause the video, go look at your sequence of tense chart, remember that, maybe go back, look over your notes on indirect question, refresher that, so you have a really strong base to build off for this new material, because we're going to dive into new material now. All right, so here's the big moment. Now we finally get to know, rather than just commanding someone to do it, like in Caesar Inquit, tange nasum, tange pedes, right? Now we can report that magister orat, right? And then report whatever the command of the teacher might be. So what exactly is that going to look like? You're going to need a reporting verb again, but this time the reporting verbs are only ever really going to be verbs of asking, begging, commanding, ordering, rather than things like I see or I hear. Okay, so that's a little bit of a difference, but you still need that main verb in the indicative that's reporting. You're going to need an ut or an a now to introduce the indirect command itself. and then you're going to put the word that was previously in the imperative into the subjunctive. Okay? So I give you a setup here, but we're actually going to change the sentence real quick to make it easier for you. I'm going to make it nara yokum. Okay? Nara yokum, and now pretend, what if the discipulus, what if I want to say that a discipulus asks this? Rather than make it a command, I want to say the discipulus asks, using this sort of pattern, see if you can figure out what this would look like when reported indirectly. Okay? Pause the video if you want some time to puzzle it out. Otherwise, I'm moving on. All right, so here we go. I provided you with the answer. There are actually two ways you can do it. One makes it a little bit easier to translate for the listener to understand, but both would be totally fine for fluent Roman in his day. Let's take a look at this. Discipulus, right? Orat. So we have the student asks. That's our main clause. That's going to be reporting the command. Now we're into the indirect command itself. We need that ut to introduce it, so we start there. And now we need to say, well, where's my verb in the command? What's being asked, right? Oh, naro, narare. So I'm going to say nares. And then we have yokum. A useful thing to put in here, though, is who you are asking. Because that's going, I mean, right now we know that the student was asking you because the subject, the personal ending here is an S, so we know that the student asks you to tell a joke. But we can make it more obvious by putting that te in the accusative in the first part of the sentence. So the student asks you to tell a joke. Okay? What is the other usage of the subjunctive that uses ut or ne plus the subjunctive? We've learned one other. It's a good opportunity for retrieval. So if you want to, before we finish off our understanding of indirect command, let's pause for a moment and try and remember what that other usage is. The other usage is purpose clauses. Remember? I could say the student discipulus legit reads ut discant, so that in order to learn, the student reads in order to learn. Notice that while these things are going to look similar, there are going to be ways to tell the difference between how you should translate them. The main one being that this isn't a verb of commanding, asking, or begging, right? Whereas this is. But we'll work on that more in class right now. For now, we're going to go back to just worrying about indirect command. Okay? So, moving forward. As a summary, we need that introducing reporting verb, asking, begging, demanding, ordering. The actual command itself is now going to be introduced by ut or ne. Ne if it's negative, ut if it's a positive command, if you're asking someone to do something, as opposed to asking someone not to do something. If you have to translate the actual word in the subjunctive, we're going to translate it as subject to verb, right? Because the student asks you to tell a joke. And then what tenses of the subjunctive might we see with indirect command? In order to answer this question, I would recommend that you pause the video and think about your sequence of tenses chart. If indirect commands are reporting a command, what tense of the subjunctive might you see? This is kind of a complex idea, but it's a good stretch. So pause the video and think about it, and then I'm going to move on. Just the present or imperfect. Yes, because if you think about it, both of these tenses are used to express an action that will happen after the main verb or at the same time as the main verb. You're not going to ask someone to have already done something, which would be the perfect and pluperfect subjunctive usage in a subordinate clause. So because of that, you're never going to see the perfect or pluperfect subjunctive in an indirect command. You can go back and replay that and think about it. It's a useful thing to think about because it helps reinforce our understanding of how the sequence of tenses work. Okay? So much like purpose clauses, we're never going to see a purpose clause in the perfect or pluperfect because you're not going to do something in order that something in the past might have already happened. We don't have any Marty McFlys here, if anyone gets Back to the Future references. I don't know. We'll see. But, all right. Moving on to wrap things up. Practice sentences. So pause the video here and take a crack at these on your own, and then I will show you the answers and walk through the reasons for those answers with you. Okay? Let's fire away. Pause the video. I'm going to switch. Okay. Oro ne me akiras. We see that ne, we finally have a negative imperative, negative command that we're reporting. Oro, we start with our main verb, ordro ne me okidas. A good thing to do would be to put a box here to know, all right, this is going to be ne to the next verb. It's going to be my subordinate clause. I ask, and now where am I going to get who am I asking from? If there's not something before the ne, if there's not an accusative before the ne, I know I have to get the person I'm asking from the subjunctive verb. I ask you, because that's an S ending, not ne, to kill me. Oro ne me okidas. I ask you not to kill me. Okay? Line number 2. So we're going to read in Latin first. Godfridas milites suos rogavit. We see ut, so we put the first block down. Pontem ligneum aedificaveret. We see our next verb. So we know that's our subordinate clause. We go back to the beginning. We know we can just take this main clause by itself now. Godfridas asked his soldiers. This is nice. We have the accusative in the main clause, so we now know what the subject of the subordinate clause will be. Godfridas asked his soldiers to build. Oh, that doesn't make sense. They won't have, as I said before, that you're not going to have a perfect here. He asked his soldiers to build a wooden bridge. Why is it imperfect subjunctive here? Because we're in secondary sequence. Up here we're in primary sequence, present tense verb in the main clause. So we had a present tense subjunctive. Down here, past tense verb. So we're in secondary sequence. So we have an imperfect subjunctive. So Godfridas asked his soldiers to build a wooden bridge. Okay? The leader asks them to spare the inhabitants. We can throw down leader in the nominative. That should be the fairly easy part. The asks is going to be rogat or orat, either are fine. Asks them is optional. You can either put it in or not, because the Latin reader will know who they were asking when they get to the end of the sentence, which is incolis parcant. Ut, right? The leader asks them to spare the inhabitants. In colis here, dative with parco, which takes the dative, much like in video, takes the dative. Ducks, the leader asks them to spare the inhabitants. Okay? So, I know this is probably still a little bit wacky. You can go back, play through this, and walk through the explanations again. But we will also do plenty more practice in class together as a group, where we'll dive in and get a little more comfortable with this usage. Hope you have a good rest of your evening. Bye.